Welcome to Lesson 3 for Saxon Math Course 3. Today we'll be talking about addition and subtraction word problems. Our objectives for today, after this lesson, you should be able to find missing numbers in problems about combining, separating, comparing, and elapsed time. And then also be able to write and solve equations from your word problems. A little bit of review from Lesson 2. Remember the names of the parts of these different problems. We have addends and the sum for addition, minuend minus subtrahend equals difference for subtraction, factor times factor equals product for multiplication, and dividend divided by divisor equals quotient for division. And for the videos, because you don't have a division symbol on your Chromebooks, this / is what we'll use to represent division from now on, so be looking for that. We also talked about the commutative, associative, and identity properties of addition and multiplication. If you need to brush up on those, you can always look in your books in Lesson 2. And the zero property of multiplication, which was a different one than, they didn't have that in addition, only for multiplication. And then remember, there were no properties we learned for subtraction and division, because those numbers, the order really matters, and so do the groupings. So we have to be careful with moving numbers around in those kinds of problems. All right, so our new concept is all about word problems. And really, word problems can be some of the harder problems in math, just because, especially at your level and a little bit higher, they like to throw some unnecessary information in the problem, not to confuse you, but to make sure you're paying attention for what they're really asking. So you always have to pay attention to what the problem is actually asking you for, especially when they have some extra information in there. And it can be helpful to write down all the given information and decide what's important after you know everything that they've given you to work with. Today's lesson, though, we're only focusing on word problems that use addition or subtraction to solve. So these are going to be a little bit easier than some of the later word problems that you run into. First one we're going to look at are word problems about combining. So these problems are all about putting two or more groups together to form a new group. We're going to use addition to solve these word problems. And here's your pattern. Each word problem has a pattern. So you'll look for the words that are like these words in the word problem to give you a clue about what kind of word problem you're dealing with. So we have sum, you start with sum, you add some more, and then you have a new total. So here's an example. In the first half of the game, Heidi scored 12 points. In the second half, she scored 15 points. In the whole game, Heidi scored 27 points. So here is that pattern repeated again with the numbers from the word problem. Now you have to pay attention to what number they're asking you to find. If they're asking for the total, then that's the simplest one, because all you're going to do is add those other two numbers together. If they're asking for one of the other two numbers, you treat this like a missing number in an addition problem, and you would have to subtract the other information to find that missing number. The second kind of word problem we're going to talk about are separating word problems. So in these, we have a group of something, and we're breaking that group apart and making two smaller groups. So we're going to use, these are subtraction word problems. Here's our pattern. You start with an amount of something. Some of it goes away, and then your equals is what's left. So here's an example. Money is used quite often in problems like this. Alberto went to the store with a $20 bill. He bought a loaf of bread and a half gallon of milk for a total of $4.83. The clerk gave him $15.17 in change. So here's that pattern again, repeated with those numbers put in the correct spots. Again, you need to pay attention to which number is missing and what they're asking you to find, because if they're asking for what's left, then you're simply going to subtract like we showed here. If they're asking for what went away, so how much went away, you're going to still subtract the other two numbers. But if they're asking for how much you started with, then you're going to have to add those two numbers. So you can kind of look at this problem and imagine those numbers missing and see why that's true. So if it had said, Alberto bought a loaf of bread and a half-gallon of milk for $4.83, the clerk gave him $15.17 in change. How much money did he start with? You would have to add those two amounts to get that $20. The final two are very related to each other, so we'll cover those at the same time. Comparing and elapsed time. They're about showing how much greater or smaller one group is compared to another, or about how much time has gone by from one point to another. And for the purposes of this lesson, when we're talking about time, we're not going to be talking about time like on a clock. We're going to be talking about time like years. So these will be the kind of problems where you're finding out how old someone is based on the year of their birth and the current year, or things like that. So bigger chunks of time. These are also subtraction word problems. Here are the two patterns. It's always going to be the bigger number minus the smaller number. So greater minus lesser equals difference, or the later year, since our years in AD are going up, they're getting bigger every year. The later year comes first minus the earlier year, and that will tell you how many years have gone by. So here's an example that could contain both actually, but we'll have a later example for time gone by. So for this one, we're looking at the population numbers. From 1990 to 2000, the population of Fort Worth increased from 447,619 to 534,694, a population increase of 87,075. And there is the pattern with the numbers plugged in. Here's that second example. President John F. Kennedy was born in 1917 and was elected president in 1960 at the age of 43. And we'll plug those numbers in for that pattern as well. Again, remember, you always have to pay attention to what the problem's asking for and what number is missing. So if we're asking for the difference or the time gone by, we're going to subtract. That's the answer in the problem. If it's asking for the lesser or earlier number, that would be the middle number in these problems, we're still going to subtract. But if they're asking for the greater or the later number, you're going to have to add the other two numbers because those numbers need to be the biggest in the problem in order for it to work. That's all for this lesson on word problems. You'll have a few practice problems to look at and answer, and then make sure you write down any questions in that discussion section, and we'll go through them next time. We'll see you in the next video.